seen that old suitcase. I opened it up, my jaw dropped. I saw a card of an ex-POW named Rita Cosby, and I went, oh my gosh, this is my father.
TV correspondent Rita Cosby today on Now I've Heard Everything. I'm Bill Thompson. As time goes by, we're losing more and more of the stories told by members of the greatest generation, World War II. But a few years ago, there was one hero whose story was told when his daughter discovered it by accident. Rita Cosby was a teenager in Warsaw, Poland when World War II broke out. This teenage boy joined the Polish resistance. He fought the Nazis. He was a key member of the Warsaw Uprising. But eventually he was injured and then captured by the Nazis. And he survived a Nazi concentration camp, eventually rescued by American forces. Now, when Rita Cosby came to the U.S. after the war, he changed his name to Richard Cosby, married and had a daughter. She grew up to become an investigative reporter on television. Her name is Rita Cosby. Now, just a few years ago, when her mother passed away, Rita Cosby was looking through her mother's possessions, and one thing that she found was an old battered suitcase. And when she opened it, everything changed, because it contained the details of her father's Warsaw Uprising, his Polish resistance background, everything that he'd never talked about to anyone. Well, that's when she put on her investigative reporter hat and talked to her father, whom she hadn't talked to in several years, did research, and the result was her 2010 book, a bestseller called Quiet Hero. Now, Rita and I met one afternoon in the summer of 2010 to talk about it. In just a moment, our conversation.
Over a 30-year span, national radio personality Bill Thompson did over 10,000 interviews with people who had a hand in shaping our culture and our society. Here is one of those interviews. Enjoy.
So here now, from 2010, Rita Cosby.
Every time these days that I see a book like yours, I am encouraged anew, because your book is going to inspire so many other people to sit down with their dad, or in some cases their mom, and say, okay, it's been long enough now, tell me what happened, because we're running out of time.
And I hope that happens. In fact, since the book has come out, even on our website, we've been saying, send us your quiet hero, tell us your details. And we've gotten already all these amazing stories from young people saying, you made me want to reach out to my father. You made me want to reach out to my grandfather. Or I have had an estranged relationship with so-and-so, and your book inspired me to reach out and learn what they went through. And especially that generation. As you point out, time is passing. And in my father's case, my father's 84 years old. And I said to myself, when I found these relics that sort of triggered everything, I thought, you know what? My father is still alive. I want to know while he's here. I don't want to ever say I wish I would have. This man went through something so harrowing and so heroic. And it has been the most amazing journey of my life, and I'm so glad I did it. And I hope it does encourage others to say, let me find out about my parents' past. Let me find out about my own past.
And that's the thing. I mean, other people's stories may not be as dramatic or even as heroic, but yet, in their own way, they will be. I mean, your father's story would have been heroic no matter what you found out about him, wouldn't it?
I have learned what a hero my dad is, and I picked the title Quiet Hero because what's amazing about my dad and that whole generation is that they truly were the greatest generation. They truly were the humble ones. I mean, if you ask my father today, were you a hero? He had this great line to me, Bill, and he said, you know what? I am not a hero, but I can tell you for sure I was never a coward. And I love that line. But he still also always believes that all the attention should be on somebody else, that the focus should be on his comrades, that they were the real heroes. And I think there's something amazing about that generation and something so inspirational about that generation of the quiet humility, the quiet elegance of that generation. And I think it's something that, we can all learn from. And I agree with you that I think my father's story from beginning to end is so admirable, so heroic, and I think that it's a moral lesson, whether it's you have a parent who went through war or didn't go through war. Hopefully it is something that's going to inspire you regardless.
I also thought of, and maybe I'm going a little far afield here, but a lot of kids, when they're little, especially if they don't know much about what their dad has been through, they'll begin to fantasize. Oh, my dad must have been a prince, or my dad, I'll bet he was an airline pilot. And they usually turn out to be a little bit more mundane than that. I have a feeling that whatever you imagined, your father's real life was even bigger than that.
It's a great question because it was so much more than I ever imagined. I mean, I knew my dad went through something because I remember when I was 8 years old. I had to think of when I knew my dad was different than the other dads in the neighborhood. My dad has a heavy accent, he's Polish, and I knew he went through the war. I remember hearing these bits and pieces, but very small. And then I remember when I was very young, my mother basically shut it down and said, this is not an area to talk about. My father came back from a run, and I remember he was jogging, took his shirt off, was drenched in sweat, and I saw scars all over his body. And I thought maybe Dad got in a fight or something like that. And I asked my mother about it. My mother said, your father went through tough times growing up. We don't talk about it. And I remember hearing that line as sure as if it was yesterday. And it said to me, my father went through something so traumatic and, physically and emotionally that it was off limits. And here I become this investigative journalist, and yet in my own backyard, it's off limits. But it's true. When I was growing up, I knew my dad, obviously went through something difficult, but I never in my wildest dreams imagined what he had gone, just the incredible guts of my father and his comrades, and the incredible heroism and the incredible moral fiber that my father had at such a young age, and devotion. It's been inspiring and touching to me. I mean, I've been so in awe this last year knowing that this incredible hero was in my own backyard.
But it's also, how all the pieces of fate have to fall into place for something to happen. The tragic death of your mother, and you and your brother had all these possessions of hers, put them in storage for years, you can't bear to look at them. One day you figure, let's look at them. And you find this old suitcase that she'd kept. Now, she could have thrown that out 30 years ago, and the story would have taken a whole different turn.
It's incredible. And I remember sitting in the storage locker and that painful task of what to keep, what not to keep, and seeing that old suitcase. And suddenly, it's just by looking at it, Bill, I knew that there was something different about it because it looked old and tattered and worn, and it didn't fit with sort of everything else, and I had never seen it before. And when I opened it up, my jaw dropped. Inside was this rusty POW tag, and you can see the cover of it. It's on my, the cover's on my, the shot of it is on the cover of our book. And then also this Polish fighting armband, dirty and worn with blood in it. And then I also saw this card with secret code names on it. A name, all these different names that I didn't know what they meant. They were in Polish, but they had like secret codes, and I'm thinking, this is unusual. And then I saw a card of an ex-POW named Ryszard Kozabutsky with a different birth date than I thought my dad was all these years. And I went, oh my gosh, this is my father. And when I saw that, I was so overwhelmed. And there's something so incredible when you're sitting there and you're touching these items and touching this rusty POW tag. And now to know that it hung around my dad's neck while he was starving. And when he finally escaped from the prisoner of war camp, it is incredible. But when you touched it, I remember thinking, my father, this was clearly my father's. This is my father's life in the suitcase. And I wanted to find out.
Do you think if there hadn't been that, if your mother had thrown it away all these years ago, if you hadn't found anything tangible like that, would you have gone on this odyssey to find out the answers to the questions you had?
I don't think I would have. I think I always believed that it was an off-limits topic. And my mother made that clear when I was younger. And in fact, I know more about my father now than my mother ever did. And I think I would have always wondered bits and pieces about my dad's life. I would have always wondered what happened to him because I knew there was something. There was always this mystery. But I don't think I would have been able to have the ammunition to go and ask him. And when I called my father, and I came with, I think, an open heart, and he saw that, how much I wanted to know. And as you point out, timing, I think, in life is everything. My father was sitting back, and I think realizing when he got that call from me just only about a year and a half ago, when he got the call, I think he said, first of all, this is the daughter who I really didn't know very much. He left the family when I was a teenager. And he was so happy to hear from me. And I think he sat back and also thought, look, I'm 84 years old. If I'm ever going to share this story for history, it's now, maybe now or never. And it was sort of a beautiful collision of time and finding these things and me having the ammunition to be able to say, I have some background on you. I have some pieces here.
After After this short break, Rita Cosby talks about her and her father's emotional return to Poland.
You know, AI is not just for 22-year-old coders. A lot of us older adults are drawing on our life experience to find unique and creative ways to use AI, at home or at work. Got an AI success story you'd like to share? Tap the link below to visit our YouTube channel, AI After 40, and let's keep learning together.
Now back to my 2010 conversation with Rita Cosby.
In reading your book, it becomes apparent that he had built walls not only between him and you, and between him and everybody else about the wall. It's almost as though he built a wall between him and himself, because he didn't want these memories either.
He was really fighting within himself. And my father went to such an extreme. I mean, he went from Ryszard Kozabutsky, who had a code name, who even his comrades didn't know each other's real names, because if they got caught by the Nazis and were tortured, they could only rat out the code name. They couldn't rat out the real name. So they actually did it to protect each other. So he came, left this code name. His code name was Mountain Lion, and that's the translation in English from it. And so Mountain Lion, came over to America, changes his name from Ryszard Kozabutsky to Richard Cosby, and never really talked about it again, and never joined, basically tried to sort of separate his life from anything that reminded him of his past. And so much so, and I think it was different pieces of it. I think one of it was so emotional for him, because what he went through was so painful and so difficult for him. And then the other part was he still feels like it was his comrades who did everything, that he was lucky to be alive, but not a hero, not as courageous as the other guys. He's one of those folks who, even to this day, when I gave him my book before it came out, I said, Dad, I want you to read it, because in case there's any facts or anything that needs to be changed or something I'm missing. And he said, and he had not seen the title yet. And when he saw it and read it, he said, I love everything. He said, but I'm a little embarrassed about hero. I'm not a hero. My comrades were the heroes. Those were the real heroes. That's who you should be writing about.
And this is what I find so fascinating, that World War II veterans always say that it's the guys they left behind, the guys who didn't make it back out. Those are the heroes, they say.
And in fact, if you listen to my father's story, I mean, I can, firmly say he was truly a hero. I mean, my father, at the age of 13, was thrust into World War II, saw the planes hovering above and then dropping bombs on his hometown. Then at 15, he was offered a chance to basically get out. His mother said, I may be able to get you out of the country because my father's not Jewish. And she said, I might be able to sneak you out of Poland through the black market. I might have enough money. And my father said, no, I am staying. I am fighting for my country. And he said this great line, Bill. He said, I would rather die with friends than live with strangers. I am fighting. Can you imagine at 15 to have that kind of guts and that kind of patriotism and that kind of loyalty to your country and your comrades? And then he was surrounded by the Nazis as he got deeper and deeper into the resistance and was fighting with everything he had. And one night he talks about how they had no way to escape, and the only way to go was below ground, and they escaped through the sewers. And then he was seriously injured by a mortar shell, taken to a POW camp, and then escaped. And can you imagine? And yet he still will say, what I did was just a regular guy.
He'll say that, but I'm wondering, in the closing chapters of your book, I don't want to give too much away, because it almost reads like a novel. There's kind of the narrative here, but you go back with him to Poland, and you see the sights, you see the manhole, you stop traffic to see the manhole cover, and you see where the tank exploded and things like this. Did none of that convince him, even just a little bit? Maybe I was a little bit of a hero.
I think to this day he still wouldn't admit that. But what he will say is that it was his finest hour going to Poland, and that he was so proud of what he did for his country. Even though they were in such a David and Goliath fight against the Nazis, he looks back now with such pride, I think, of what he did and what his comrades did. And when we went back to Poland, which was amazing, I never thought he'd ever go back, because when I was growing up, he'd always say Poland was a nightmare. It was hell on earth, and it was, this horrible nightmare that he couldn't revisit. And when I gave him back these items from the suitcase, and he said, you know what, I'd love to see if any of my comrades survived. And we went back together and retraced his steps after 65 years. Literally, I was holding his hand when we took my first steps on Polish soil, and his first in 65 years. And it was very painful for him to go back and see some of the scenes. But on the other hand, he was so proud to see that Poland had not forgotten, and the world had not forgotten what he and his comrades did, because there were plaques everywhere. And then we were honored by the president of Poland. And when he saw that and saw that the young people of Poland everywhere, we went, they said, Upriser, Upriser, he's one of the guys. And when we went to the place with the sewer, one of my most beautiful moments, here we are in downtown Warsaw. Imagine if you're in downtown New York or downtown Washington, and there's the manhole cover in the middle of the street. And that was now the famous manhole. There's, gold bricks leading up to it, but there's cars going all over it too. And I said, I want my dad to go that walk again. He hasn't done it in 65 years. So we did stop traffic. And the most amazing thing was not a single car honked. And can you imagine? All these drivers were looking, and some of them with tears in their eyes, and saluting because they saw this, old fighter going back to his roots. And it was so beautiful just to see that they knew what it was. I didn't have to tell them, oh, this is my dad going back to where he escaped. They knew exactly what it was, and they were saluting as they drove by. It was beautiful.
No one's going to read this book without crying.
And you know what? I cried the whole time when I was writing it because I felt that this is the story of my life. This is the story, I hope, of a lot of people's lives. I hope it brings out the best in everyone and reminds everyone that there are so many quiet heroes in your own backyard, that it doesn't have to be a celebrity, it doesn't have to be a world leader, it doesn't have to be these people you see on television, that sometimes the most amazing people are ordinary people in your own backyard who did some extraordinary things. And I hope that this book recaptures that part of history. And when I wrote it, I said I also have to be honest about what happened with my father and I. And also my father was very honest about some of the most painful things. I mean, he wept. And for my father and I to go through this process together, a true catharsis. Now I have a father and a best friend at the end of the day.
I was just going to say, this is not the kind of thing where you say, hey, Dad, it was a wonderful time, see you again in a few years. No, you two are, I gather, closer now than ever.
And I feel like probably have one of the best relationships that maybe a daughter and father can have. And I hope it inspires people that sometimes in life there's bumps along the way. Again, my father left the family when I was young, and I really didn't feel like I had a father until this year.
Has there been talk about a movie?
We've already had a lot of people talk about that. In fact, in the early days, even before I was finished with chapter 1, I had people coming and saying, oh, you got to do a movie on this. This is amazing. And at some point, maybe we will. We've, I wanted to get the book done first. I wanted, my father, it took him 65 years to tell this story. I didn't want him to change his mind. So I wanted to hurry up and get it done for the book first.
Richard Cosby died in 2012 at the age of 86. Rita Cosby will be 61 next month. You can see her on Saturday nights on Newsmax. Now you can get your copy of Quiet Hero by Rita Cosby by tapping the link in our show notes, by clicking the link in the description below if you're watching this on YouTube, or by going to our website, heardeverything.com. We earn an Amazon commission if you make a purchase. Heardeverything.com is where you can also hear my 1999 conversation with a woman who survived the war, even though she was married to a Nazi officer, and she was Jewish. The story told by Edith Hahn Baer.
I was 3 years wanted by the Gestapo. The next generation of the youngsters, they have no idea what it was the life from day to day, and how horrible and how terrible.
And my 1982 conversation with a more latter-day Polish hero, a member of the Polish Solidarity movement, my 1982 conversation with Kazimierz Wierzbicki.
People couldn't realize that after 35 years of communist totalitarian system, you have possibility to join free independent union.
And of course, we post new episodes of Now I've Heard Everything every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and you can find us wherever you find podcasts. And thank you so much for listening. Next time on Now I've Heard Everything, you knew him for many years as a stand-up comedian. He was on The Tonight Show. My 1990 conversation with David Brenner.
I crack myself up sometimes. I had lived so much that I crack up on stage sometimes. I think that's so funny. Like someone else said it. But when I hear some of my jokes, it's like some other guy in the room told it. I go, oh, that's funny. And then I realize, hey, you said it.
That's next time. Now I've Heard Everything. I'm Bill Thompson.